Hi, everyone. Welcome back. This is Robin Runge. I'm the chair of the ABA Civil Rights and Social Justice section. And this, as you know, is our chair chat. We do this a couple of times a month. And I'm excited because this month we have my friend and my colleague and my expert on homelessness and the law, Michael Santos. And I just want to say how excited I am because every time I spend time with Michael, I learn, and there are some amazing cutting edge issues going on that Michael is leading. He actually wears many hats, and I'm going to read his bio in a second. But the one I want to lift up for a moment here is he is the chair of the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty at the American Bar Association this year. And I'm excited because we're having our spring business meetings together. I don't know if May really is spring, but we call it spring in Detroit. May 8th through 11th in conjunction with the ABA's and NLADA Equal Justice Conference. And so I'm just announcing that because this is awesome when our entities can meet together because we have a lot of overlapping issues and interests. Michael's also a very active member of the Civil Rights and Social Justice Section's Economic Justice Committee. And so we're really thrilled to be coming to Detroit. And any of you who would like to join us, please get in touch after this. So I'm going to start with just providing a little bit of background about Michael. Michael is the Associate Director at Results Educational Fund, where he works with passionate grassroots advocates who use their voices to influence political decisions on critical federal housing policies that will bring an end to poverty. Before joining Results, Michael was an eviction defense attorney at Bay Area Legal Aid, and his work there focused on advocating for homeless youth access to education through public education, impact litigation, and policy advocacy. He has a long history of working on the rights of low-income and underserved communities through the Department of Health and Human Services, the Clinton Foundation, and other nonprofits. And he currently chairs, as I mentioned, the ABA's Commission on Homelessness and Poverty. And so, as you can hear, I mean, he has all these years of experience, and you look at him and you're like, there's no way he's already done all of these things. But I'm excited because, as I mentioned, he and I have had a chance to get to know each other and work together on really critical issues. And I want to just jump into it because I think our audience is going to be really interested in learning more about these issues and the fact that things are actually happening in Congress on these issues at a time when I think the overall dialogue in that space is that nothing is moving, right? And so your work, I think, really educates us on the fact that that's not true and that there's an opportunity for continued movement on really key critical issues. So I'm going to just turn it over to you and have you start with the renter tax credit, which is not something that I think people think a lot about, but has been a really good example of this and how our work in the ABA has bolstered that. And then really kind of have you highlight some other key things that you think it's important that we know about as constituents. So thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Robin, and glad to be back and glad to be talking with you and excited about all these events that we'll be working together. So I think the best way to ground us with this conversation is we do have American Bar Association policy on this, right? This is the policy resolution 507, which was passed last year at last year's annual meeting in Denver. And it basically urges federal, state, local, territorial, and tribal governments to amend existing laws or enact new laws to provide financial support to tenants of rental housing, and urges these governments to provide administrative agencies with adequate financial resources to implement and administer these provisions, right? Like, so making sure that it's not just the actual law, but there's ways to implement and enforce the laws, the tax laws that benefit tenants of rental housing.
Yeah, and I just want to stop here and lift up that, Michael, like, this is a really good example of where, I mean, I can't, just this weekend, I read a long form article in the paper about our housing crisis, right? So we know in this country, right, that we have a tremendous housing crisis. And within that, let's just be honest, affordable housing, accessible housing crisis. And I think sometimes people feel overwhelmed, especially lawyers, about like, okay, that's a huge problem. What is my role in that? Because in fact, just this morning, part of what I heard on an NPR piece is that it's our lack, and this is so obvious, but let me just connect the dots. It's our lack of accessible, affordable housing that is linked to our increase in homelessness. I mean, this is very obvious, right? And research just came out from Harvard that reasserted this fact, right? That one of the primary reasons that we have such an increase in homelessness is that people are being forced to pay more and more and more of their total income toward rent, right? And then they just can't afford it anymore. And so
Right.
that's why I just want to say, like, people may think to themselves, how is, this sounds very archaic, but it's not. It's huge, right? And so I really can't wait for you to explain to us how this tax credit is so critical to that mission, right? That you have personally, I happen to know, that also organizationally, right, to end homelessness and alleviate poverty. Because I think, again, tax credit, people are like, you know,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. So just to unpack that question sort of slash comment a little bit, right? You talked about housing affordability, affordable housing. And I think there's arguments about how we should be working primarily on the supply of affordable housing, which is great. And I think that is very much needed as part and parcel of a set of
we need
tools to
everything. We
address.
need
Yeah,
everything, right,
we need a
Michael? We
whole,
need
yes,
all
we
hands
need a
on deck on
suite.
this. Yes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly. But at the same time, you also need to demand, address the demand side
Yes.
of the affordable housing crisis, because often what happens is when you build affordable housing, it's the question is affordable to whom, right? Let's be realistic about this, right? Like people, when you see rental properties or housing properties, it's not like those prices go down over time; they keep going up, and so there needs to be a solution on the demand side to actually help those people who have fallen behind economically, to actually bring them up to speed as we try to build more supply of affordable housing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and we see and there are many different ways to solve the affordable housing and the homelessness crisis, right? There are a patchwork of homelessness housing assistance programs, all of which are housed within our annual appropriations in Congress. And so it is subject to the whim and the political will of Congress, whether they want to fund it, gut it, grow it, right? But over time, it's only been able to, like, the growth is really just incremental.
Right.
And so part of this concept of of a renter tax credit is how can we use the tax code to deliver targeted relief to struggling renters across the country, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about rent burdened households who are paying more than 30% of their income, monthly income towards rent. And oftentimes they pay more than that, right? 50% or more.
Yeah, exactly. This
Depending on where
research
you
from
live.
Harvard was really appalling because it showed, right, like at different income levels, what percentage, I mean, over 50% is becoming a majority of certain brackets, right, of income. I mean, you can't survive like that. Yeah.
Right, right. And again, it's not just, it's not just this dynamic of like the lack of supply. Well, it is largely the lack of supply of affordable housing, but it's also the geographical differences
Yes.
in housing prices, right? Like San Francisco, the cost of housing in San Francisco is a lot different than if you're in some rural town in Iowa or Idaho, for example.
Right, right.
And so it is a big problem, and we see the tax code as part of the solution.
So
Right.
how? Like, explain to me how this works. Because again, my brain is like, I don't understand tax, which I probably should not be confessing on this public space, but I really don't, right? And so help us understand why this is such an effective tool.
Yeah, so as I was saying before, just to give it some additional context, housing assistance and homelessness programs are mostly housed within appropriations, annual appropriations in Congress. What we're looking at are other systems that could potentially address the affordable housing and homelessness crisis in different ways. And there are existing systems there, right? And that includes our federal tax code, the Internal Revenue Code. And there have been precedent in terms of how we use the tax code to address the affordable housing crisis. We have this low-income housing tax credit provided to developers to stimulate building more affordable housing across the country. But we don't have anything that actually prioritizes renters on the demand side. Again, when we look at renters, we look at those housing and homelessness assistance programs in the appropriation cycle. By looking at the tax code and creating this potential federal renter tax credit, which, by the way, some states are already doing it, right? California, Hawaii, some high cost of rent costs in these states have some renter tax credit in place. The problem with these state level renter tax credits is that they're insufficient and inadequate. So to
Mhm.
use California, for example, I believe the amount that you can get if you qualify and fall within the income limits is a measly $50, right? That doesn't even cover probably gas money if you
Right,
live in the state.
right.
Same with Hawaii. It's very, very tiny, right? So by using the federal tax code, we would be able to create another set of solution to the affordable housing and homelessness crisis. And this time, the way we design the tax laws in this country is that it's not subject to the annual appropriations. And so this is another way of actually creating some
Got it.
type of entitlement within that would address the diverse housing needs of the country,
Yeah.
right? And I think the premise of the renter tax credit, we don't have a federal renter tax credit yet, and I think that's something that we are looking into, pushing on the Hill, is the idea of working renters being able to get some type of tax credit if they're paying more than 30% of their rent towards
Right. Right.
I'm sorry, paying 30% of their income towards rent. Right, so
Yeah.
that's the whole idea, and essentially it functions like other tax credits that have already been put in place, like the
Yeah.
earned income tax
Yeah.
credit or the child tax credit, right? If
Right.
you are eligible and you meet
You just get it. Yeah.
the eligibility, right? If you're eligible, then you get the tax credit. The same would apply for some type of renter tax credit that we're looking at. And
Yeah.
speaking of which, we actually have some upcoming ABA programming on this issue.
Oh, great. I'm so
It's
glad
called
you're on.
How the Tax Code Can Help Renters. It's on March 12th, Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. This is sponsored by the ABA section of Civil Rights and Social Justice and the Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence and the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty and the ABA tax section. So different entities within the ABA have
Yeah.
converged and really put together this programming that features two experts. I will be moderating this conversation. It's a conversation between academics, Dr. Sarah Kimberlin, who's the executive director and senior research scholar at Stanford Center on Poverty and Inequality, and the tax section's Michelle Laser. She's an associate professor of law at University of San Diego School of Law.
Right. Well, thank you. And I think we'll make sure to circulate that information. We always do, but if folks want to make sure that they can sign up for that, and I want to highlight it's free, right? And so low barrier to entry. And I really want to lift up what you just said, like the tax section and the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty and the Civil Rights and Social Justice section and the Commission on Domestic and Sexual Violence are all co-sponsoring this. So this tells you, right, this is like a crossing lines. You might not think of all those entities together and the people who work in those spaces. And so this is one of my favorite things about the ABA, but we'll make sure, if you want to make sure that you get information about that, you can follow up with the Civil Rights and Social Justice section. There's contact information that we made available. And obviously, if you become a member of our section, you will get regular newsletters. But so, Michael, that's remarkable, right? And I really appreciate you making that concrete for us about what we're talking about and how it would work. And that there are state laws, but there's an effort to get it passed on a federal level. So speaking of the federal level, I would love for you to share with us some of the things that you're working on the federal level that you think are really exciting and important for everyone who is looking for housing, has housing, needs housing, is advocating for housing, right? And against poverty needs to know about.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought that up. In terms of what's happening on the Hill in Congress, there's still the ongoing push for getting the different programs within the federal government funded through the appropriations. So that's, I believe the deadline is like this early March, shortly after Congress comes back from their President's Day weekend recess. And in terms of the renter tax credit, it's not like it's unprecedented. Have been a couple of bills we introduced in past past sessions of Congress, on a concept for a federal renter tax credit. So one is by Representative Clyburn and Senator Booker. The other one is by Representative Danny Davis from Illinois and Senator Warnock from Georgia. One is called the Rent Relief Act. The other one is called the Home Act. So you can feel free to check those out if you're curious as to how lawmakers are looking into what a possible federal renter tax credit could look like. And if you want to endorse or find ways to support, please get in
Yeah.
touch with us, or feel free to reach out directly to those offices, since I know they would love to hear support from, whether you're an advocate, whether you're a tenant, or
Right.
like another lawmaker. I think that's really helpful.
Yeah.
To uplift, since we certainly need this. The idea here is that a lot of families and households who end up experiencing homelessness, many of them are still working, which is pretty much tells you that they're part of the tax system in some
Right.
ways, right?
Right.
And the idea here is that if we can provide the rent relief, if they're paying, if they can get some type of tax credit the moment that they pay more than 30% of their income towards
Right.
their rent, that will help at least make housing affordable and prevent them from losing their housing, or prevent them from experiencing homelessness, or helping them get back on their feet, right?
Yeah.
So that's one piece. The other piece is, as many of you probably have heard in other news outlets, 2025 is a huge year for taxes, because that is when the tax cuts enacted in 2017 by Congress, many of those provisions will expire. And so
Oh,
we're about to see another you know, possible tax legislation moving through Congress next year. We don't know certainly what the timing looks like, but that is certainly on the table. Now 2024 is an election year, so we anticipate Congress likely not getting a lot of bills and legislation forward,
right.
given that once summer is as we get into summer, many lawmakers are going to be running for office again, and so they're going to be off the campaign, like they're going to be off to the races and on the campaign trail. But this is also an excellent opportunity for those lawmakers really to hear from renters, to hear from households, to hear
Right.
from advocates like us, like lawyers like us, right? Members of
Right.
the American Bar Association, to hear directly from these people the importance of the importance of renter tax credit, or the importance of making housing more affordable. I think this is an issue that is ongoing, and is very much needed. We hear a lot from our grassroots volunteers and advocates at Results of how much they pay for
Right.
housing, how expensive rental housing is,
Right. And so
across.
Michael, when you talk about, because I'll confess to you, I had no idea that a bunch of these tax credits were expiring in 2025. Are there ones in particular that you think that we need to really be focusing on and understand that are going to disproportionately impact, people who are on this precarious place in terms of losing their housing, or slipping into
Absolutely,
poverty? Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, I think we're going to make a big push for the renter tax credit, but there are also other tax credits out there, right?
Yeah.
There's the child tax credit, and some of you who have been following the work around child tax credit, unbelievably, in this Congress, despite the political gridlock, as you had
No.
referenced earlier, Robin, right? The House of Representatives voted overwhelmingly 357 yes, to 70 no's. That's a huge margin,
Amazing.
to pass an
Bipartisan,
expanded version.
bipartisan.
It is a bipartisan expansion of the child tax credit. That also included, some business tax breaks extensions, right? So
Right.
it is a
Right.
compromise. So there are business, tax breaks there, but at the same time, we're able to help families,
Yeah.
low-income families in
Yeah.
particular.
Well, and I hope that part of what that's a product of, Michael, is how much we learned, during the pandemic with COVID, right? When the
Right,
implementation of those tax credits came in, and we have all this data now that shows how that directly lessens child poverty. I mean, there's just such a clear connection. So, I was really disappointed that initially those tax credits expired, but was thrilled and frankly surprised, right? For all the reasons we know about the chaos going on, that this did come through. And yet I shouldn't be, right? Because it is a bipartisan issue, right? And it affects
right.
everybody, regardless of what jurisdiction you're in. And they have got constituencies who profoundly benefited from that. So I'm excited, but now it's got to get through the rest of the process, right? Before it gets to the
Right.
president.
I mean, the ball is now in the Senate's court,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, time is the enemy here, right? Because there's a lot to do in the Senate, and I think when they come back from recess, I think the first thing, first order of business is the impeachment of Secretary Mayorkas,
They've
since he
got
was recently.
other priorities, but we can
Um,
hopefully we can remain hopeful. Is there anything else that and I know I want to let you go because I could talk to you forever, but is there one more thing if you really wanted us to walk away from this conversation to make sure people have their eyes on, right? So that when we are in our different spaces, again, ABA has an advocacy day every year, right? It's coming up this spring. These are things for us to keep on our radar. So we've got the renter's tax credit, right? We've got the child tax credit. Is there something else in the space that you're like, okay, wait, we can't get off this call and this conversation, right? Until everybody knows about this third thing,
Yeah, I mean, I think in addition to those two things that you have pointed out, there's also the earned income tax credit, the low income housing tax credit.
right?
All of these, especially the tax credits that go directly to the hands of the people
Oh,
we're trying to
yeah,
help.
yeah,
The great news about tax credits is that it comes in the form of money, and
yes.
money is fungible, right? Fungible. I don't know if
Mhm.
I'm mispronouncing it, but because it's fungible, like all these other tax credits, like people use it in different ways, in
Yeah.
creative ways. Some people use it to pay for food. Some people use it to pay for housing. Some people pay it for childcare. And
Credit
so,
card
but
debt,
then,
right? Yeah,
yes,
like,
yes. At the end of the day, like, tax credits are really important. So keep pushing for those that benefit low income people in particular. I think the vision for a federal renter tax credit is that we want to prioritize renters because these other tax credits have limited,
right.
effectiveness and
And they
reach
apply to
because
homeowners, right? There have been homeowner
right.
tax credits since the dawn of time. Yeah.
Right. And the child tax credit, for example, like it
Yeah.
only benefits families with children. It
Children,
doesn't benefit,
right,
like young people, young adults, older people who do not have kids, right?
right,
So I
right.
think there's a bigger potential on like how we structure the tax code to have a broader reach and be able to help all these people who are struggling to pay rent.
And as you pointed out, are paying taxes, right? I mean, this
Right.
concept of the working poor is relatively new in our society, but the idea that you can be working one, two, three jobs and still be homeless is something that I don't think our society fully appreciates or understands. And yet, I also, like you, practiced in San Francisco for a while, representing survivors of domestic and sexual violence, and learned, I represented nurses who were in homeless shelters, right? I learned more
Right.
about how the homeless situation worked in San Francisco. And I was representing people because I'm an employment lawyer who trying to keep or get their jobs, right? So these are people who were at a minimum full-time employed, sometimes cobbling together multiple, right, jobs.
Yes,
And yet
absolutely.
there
Yeah.
was no way that they were ever going to be able to put together enough money to even do a down payment for renting a studio. And so I think what I appreciate about this conversation and your work every day, frankly, is really helping people understand that these are taxpayers and that as taxpayers, there are tools available, right, that we've paid into. These are entitlements, right? If
Right,
you paid
right,
into the
right.
system, right, right,
And
if
it's
you
just a
paid
way
in.
of leveraging the systems that we already have in place, right? Like being creative as to how we
Exactly.
actually leverage these systems. And I think the other thing I would just flag is that, by really looking at and advocating for using the tax code to benefit low income renters and to use it to prevent and end homelessness in some way,
Yeah.
is that we're really breaking this narrative of like once you're experiencing homelessness that you're that's it, right? But
That's right.
contrary
You're
to
going
the
to be
point,
homeless forever. Yeah.
right, and to your point, right? Like when you work with someone who has experienced homelessness, many of them are still working. They're still
Yes.
trying, they're working. They're
Yep.
part of the system.
Right.
They just need an additional, like that extra lift to your point about being able to put down a security deposit or
Yeah.
pay for the utilities,
Yeah.
or to get them started to actually get their foot in the door to an apartment, to an affordable apartment or rental.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for all of your leadership, both within the ABA and in your day job. I mean, I just want to say, like, these are the moments when I'm most proud of the ABA, right? That we do have policy in support of the renters tax credit. And I think you've really helped us understand why that's so critical and why the partnership between the Commission on Homelessness and Poverty and the Civil Rights and Social Justice section and the tax section, right, was critical to getting that over the threshold. And I think it's a really great connection to see how then that policy can be used by advocates around the country and their efforts, right, to ensure that we get a federal renter's tax credit and hopefully better on the state level. So I just want to recognize and thank you and lift up again the program that you are putting together with some of our colleagues in March 12th, I think you said it was. And we're going to make sure to get information out about that because I think there's a lot here to learn about. And thank you for your time today, out of your crazy busy schedule. And looking forward to seeing you soon, definitely in Detroit in May, if not sooner. So thank you so much, Michael.
Thanks, Robin.